Webcast test, webcast test.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's meeting of the South Planning Committee. Item 1, apologies for absence and appointment of substitute members.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Dermot Bambridge, Councillor William Barter and Councillor Raymond Connolly is substituting for Councillor Bambridge. Councillor Louisa Fowler has just joined the committee and will start sitting from the November meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Welcome, Councillor Connolly. Thank you for substituting. Declarations of interest. Do we have any? Councillor Clubley.
Yes, Chair. I'd like to declare an interest in item 7, London Road Toaster, in view of the objections raised by Toaster Town Council, and being a member of that council, I will abstain from voting.
Thank you very much. Item 3, the minutes. To confirm the minutes of the meeting of the committee held on the 5th of September. Are we agreed? Thank you. Chairman's announcements. Due to the size of tonight's agenda and a large number of registered speakers, may I remind members and all those speaking to stick to the salient planning issues in order to help us get through the agenda in a timely and expeditious manner. Thank you. Members of the public are permitted to film, broadcast and report on the meeting, subject to the efficient running of the meeting not being affected. Only those people who have registered in line with the committee's speaking procedure may address the committee. Members of the public are requested not to call out during the committee's discussions on any item. All speakers will have 3 minutes in which to make their statement and are asked to remain seated after they have addressed the committee to answer any questions that the committee may have. This meeting is being webcast on the Council's corporate YouTube channel. Therefore, could all of those speaking please utilise their microphones when doing so and speak close to the microphone. There are no planned fire drills, so if the alarm does sound, evacuation instructions will be given by Democratic Services. Please ensure that any devices are switched off or onto silent mode. For the benefit of the public watching remotely, I will now introduce the top table, starting from my furthest right, where we have Catherine Hall, our legal advisor, Richard Wood, our administrator. I'm Councillor Stephen Clark, the committee chairman and a member of the council. Simon Ellis is on my left, head of development management. Nathan Loud, is he here at the end? Yes, team leader for the mainstream applications south part of the council. Then we have our planning officers beyond and round the room here. For item 6, we have Dan Callis. For item 7, we have Chris Burton. For item 8, Nikki Scaife. Item 9, James Patterson. Item 10, Jonathan Moore. Item 11, Shamal London. So, without further ado, item 5, pre-committee site visits. For any items requiring a site visit that are due to be heard at the next meeting of the committee on the 7th of November, any such visits will be held at 10 o'clock on Tuesday, the 5th of November, and the details will be circulated by Democratic Services. Our first application that we will deal with this evening is item 6. That's the land parcel 2 to the west of Welsh Lane, Sarisham. Mr. Callis.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, so item 6 is an application for outline planning permission for a truck stop facility with associated fueling station, amenity building, including ancillary sale of goods and other associated works. All matters are reserved except for access. The application site lies approximately 600 metres southwest of Sarisham and roughly 500 metres southeast of Pimlico. The site extends to 2.6 hectares of agricultural land and abuts the A43 to the south, which you can see on the screens, and the B4525 to the east, again, which you can see on the screen. The access is to be taken from the latter. The site is bound on all sides by existing mature mixed field field hedgerow. A semi-mature belt of trees and shrubs lines the side of the cutting to the A43. Immediately to the west of the site is a private residential property known as Lakeside View. The property stands in spatial grounds which contain a large pond and also a registered caravan and camping site. Red House Farm lies 170 metres to the northwest. To the north of the site are small grass agricultural fields or paddocks, and to the north of those is High Cross Farm, approximately 200 metres from the site. The land to the east and south, beyond the A43 and B4525, is agricultural. There's a potential wildlife site 360 metres to the south on the opposite side of the A43, and another potential wildlife site, an ancient woodland, 800 metres to the northwest. There are no public rights of way running through the site, although a bridle way does run along the outside of the site's southern boundary, essentially sandwiched between the site and the A43. The site's topography falls gently from northeast to southwest, with a total fall of approximately 9 metres. Just to take you through some images of the site. So this is standing on the bridge over the A43 looking towards the site. The signage you can see on the right-hand side is the sort of roundabout, teardrop roundabout on the north side of that, which continues on to the B4525. So the site is behind the vegetation you can see beyond those. And this also gives an impression as to the maturity of the existing landscaping along the A43. This is the site access. So this is in the northeast corner of the site looking west. The application site is everything within the field that you can see. The north boundary on the right-hand side is a mature and managed hedgerow. You can just make out the hedgerow to the southern boundary with the bridleway being on the outside of that. And then again, an impression as to the surrounding landscaping. So this is a view from within the site. This is looking west towards Lakeside View, which you can hopefully make out with the cursor in amongst the trees. You can see how the site dips into the far left corner. And then a view from approximately the same spot looking back towards the site access. You can see the streetlights from the roundabout of the A43 B4525 junction. Another wider view of that. A view looking towards the northern boundary showing the hedgerow that exists there. And this just shows the bridleway that runs along the site's southern boundary. So the site is on the right-hand side of this, behind the hedge, but it just gives an impression as to the context of that bridleway. So this is another view from the teardrop roundabout on the north side of the A43. So the application site is behind the hedge line that you can see just beyond the road. And the car that you can see on the right-hand side is the approximate location of the site access. And then this finally is a view from the junction off the B4525, the road into Cyrisham. So this is to the north of the site looking south towards the application site. So in terms of the proposal, there are 52 HGV spaces and 2 coach spaces, a fuel station with sale space of up to 688 square metres. The fuel storage tanks would be above ground and indicated in the position here on the right-hand side, adjacent to the site access. There's the canopy for the fuel pumps, which would have a height of 5 metres, single-storey building. There's also a 6-metre high earth bund to the western side of the site, which would also have planting on it, and then a suds basin in front of that, occupying the natural lower part of the site, as we saw in the photographs. Just to stress, though, that the application is in outline, and the only detail that we have for consideration at this stage is the access itself. In terms of that access, the proposed access would be 55 metres north of the A43 junction roundabout. The turning circles for it have been tracked to ensure that they would accommodate HGVs. There is then a footway provided out of the site on the right-hand side heading south to a point where it meets with the bridleway, which crosses the B4525. You can see that in blue on the plan. However, there's no onward connection of any footway or cycleway to connect with existing metalled footways in the local area. Site access would not have a separate right-hand turn lane into the site. And also, just to point out, the purple line on here indicates the visibility displays that would be required for the access. And as we saw in the photographs, but also on the site visit, that would require the removal of some of the existing vegetation that's currently within the highway boundary. Just to give impression as to the wider landscape and visual effects of the development, the plan here is a zone of theoretical visibility modelled with development of up to 5 metres, which is the height of the proposed fuel pump canopy. So the sort of peach coloured areas you can see is the places where you could hypothetically see it from. But that doesn't necessarily account for changes in vegetation, hedgerows, tree growth, etc. In terms of the proposed drainage, again, this is indicative, but it does indicate that the surfacing would be quite a large extent of it would be permeable paving. It would drain into the Suds Basin and then would then be pumped as necessary back up to the site frontage and connect with an existing surface water sewer. And finally, just to look at biodiversity net gain. So to be clear, biodiversity net gain is not mandatory on this application as it predates the statutory introduction of that earlier this year. However, the site does achieve an increase in habitat units of 9.82% and hedgerow units of 1.16%. And this plan gives an indication as to the types of landscaping that would be utilised to achieve that. So to conclude, with regard to updates, members' attention is drawn to the objections in the written updates, including the objection from the local MP. There are no other updates to report. The recommendation is that planning permission be refused for the reasons set out in the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. And our first speaker is Ian Draper on behalf of Saracen Parish Council. If you'd come to the front, to the microphone. And if you press the button in the base of the microphone, a red light will come on and you can speak. So please speak when you're ready. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to address this meeting on behalf of the Parish Council.
Could you move closer to the microphone, please?
Is that better?
Yes.
I wish to confirm our opposition to the proposal for the truck stop adjacent to the A43 and B4525. Development as described would have a number of strongly negative impacts on the local environment in the midst of what is a pleasant but already busy rural setting. The village community would be adversely affected by additional traffic noise, street lighting and other related factors. B4525 Welsh Lane is a single carriageway rural route with appropriate speed limits, with existing and increasing traffic flows coming from the Banbury direction, merging onto the A43 at what will become a much busier junction at a point where the HGVs will be accessing and departing from the proposed facility. And there is a question as to whether or not the access gateway is in a suitable position regarding the roundabout. The route is almost always busy and especially so at peak times. Currently, with the additional levels of HS2 construction traffic using it regularly over and above the normal traffic flow. The proposal includes aspects that are in conflict with the local development plan for the purposes of planning and compulsory purchase Act 2004. Key question is whether a development of the proposed size is required and justified at this location and in this setting. The view of the parish council is that it is not justified or required. The access from the A43 towards Banbury will be at an increased risk of accidents with additional heavy traffic flows at the site on the B4525, some short distance from the A43 slip road. Although speed limits apply on the Welsh Lane, there is always the risk of meeting high volumes of unanticipated HGV traffic, leaving the site and cutting across the regular traffic on the B4525, often at inappropriate speeds. Proposal will create unnecessary environmental harm to the rural landscape, which has not been adequately assessed, and the inevitable intrusion of signage, advertising and lighting does not appear to have been adequately assessed. The proposed mitigation does very little to reduce the visual harm. The site is in open countryside with some not insignificant historic importance, based on the fact that the ancient cattle droving routes travelled this way. And
thank you, Mr. Draper. I must stop you there. If you'd remain in your seat in case of questions from members. So are there any questions for Mr. Draper? No? Thank you very much, Mr. Draper.
Thank you. You want me to switch off?
Yes, please. And we have our next speaker as an objector, Gemma Morgan, on behalf of the No Truck Stop Group. If you'd press the button for the microphone when you're ready and speak.
Good evening. My name is Gemma Morgan, and along with my neighbours, I live in the village of Sirisham. When we first became aware of the truck stop planning application, our community was in complete disbelief. The notion that our village could be subjected to such a proposal seemed entirely out of step with the character and needs of our area. In response, we, along with our fellow residents, formed the No Truck Stop Sirisham group to oppose this development. Our purpose today is to explain why we strongly object to this application, which threatens to impose profound and permanent changes to the local area. The proposed site is greenfield land located in open countryside as defined in the local plan part 2. This application should be rejected based on the very reasons outlined on pages 57 to 58 of the officer's report. The proposed truck stop operating 24/7, complete with a fueling station, would bring severe levels of water, light, air, and noise pollution to an area that is ill-equipped to handle such environmental pressures. It is inconceivable that the proposed mitigation measures could adequately address these impacts. Our group is fortunate to include a retired acoustics expert. His professional review of the developer's reports and the Environmental Health Officer's assessment raised significant concerns. In his view, the EHO's suggestion that a noise management plan could be left to the developer amounts to a dereliction of duty. In his 35 years of experience, he has never encountered such a stance. Beyond pollution, this development would result in the permanent destruction of the countryside and the loss of vital wildlife habitats. As emphasised in the officer's report, the increased traffic this truck stop would generate presents serious road safety concerns, particularly given the proximity of the A43 slip road and the B4525 roundabouts, which are entirely unsuitable for a development of this nature. Considering these widespread concerns voiced by the local community, surrounding parish councils and our village school, we organised a petition supported by our then MP, Dame Andrea Ledson. With over 450 signatories, Dame Andrea presented this petition in the House of Commons in April 2023. Our campaign has also received the support of Sarah Boole MP. Let's be clear, a truck stop with a fueling station located in this rural greenfield setting in direct contradiction to WNC's local plan must be refused for the reasons outlined in the officer's report. Such a development would degrade our environment and endanger the well-being of residents. We implore you
Ms.
to
Morgan. I
reject
should
this
stop you
proposal
there.
unanimously.
Can you remain in your seat, please, in case of questions from members? Are there any questions for Ms. Morgan? No? Thank you very much. Now we have Chantal Wilson, a local resident, who will address us. Please press the button and start when you're ready.
Hello, my name is Chantal, and together with my family, we live at Lakeside View next to the proposed site. We strongly object to this planning application, which is contrary to the council's local plan, part 2 of the building on greenfield land. Lakeside View is a registered campsite and has been established for over 30 years. Should this planning be approved, the truck stop will have a catastrophic impact on our livelihood and personal lives. There will be the noise and pollution of running diesel engines, the sound of reversing alarms, the whooshing of air brakes, the constant running of refrigeration units, door slams and light pollution, as the whole site will be lit up, not to mention our safety being put at risk. Truck stops attract serious and organized crime, and this will be all day and night. The truck stop boundary will only be 21 meters from our house, as stated on page 42 of the officer's report. Therefore, these specific sounds will be very clear and also very different from the droning of the A43. It is wrong for the environmental health officer to state that these sounds would not be distinguishable from the A43. The bund will not stop the noise, especially as the majority of our land lies several meters higher. My campers have been described as transient by the environmental health officer and therefore immune to noise, which is absurd, as my campers will be impacted the same as we are. South Northants has long had an affinity with the motorsport industry, and we pride ourselves in providing a service for people wishing to attend Silverstone Circuit. Some have been coming to me for years and from as far as Scotland. Most of the boundary is established with native trees and vegetation with an array of wildlife, such as deer, foxes, badgers, kites, bats, woodpeckers, kingfishers, and herons. The development fails to investigate the impact on protected species, like the great crested newt, as outlined on page 58 of the officer's report, which is contrary to South Northants policies. HS2 is already occupying vast amounts of open countryside, making it even more essential to preserve our wildlife and plant life. The UK is one of the most nature-depleted countries in the world, and despite nature struggling against all odds to survive, more than 1 in 7 species face extinction, and more than 40% are in decline. That's WWF. But this is not just about my family and I. This proposal will permanently change the rural character of our community for the worse. I urge you to reject this ill-considered proposal, as this would be of no benefit and only cause harm. Thank you.
Thank you. If you'd remain there in case of questions from members. Are there any questions for Ms. Wilson, please? Councillor Barrett.
Thank you.
Sorry, just going back to your business in terms of numbers, how many people use your site per year, per event? You got a rough?
A year. Well, we're open most of the year. We're very
Can you
busy.
speak into the microphone?
Oh, sorry, we're open most of the year, and we're busy, especially during the summer season, spring and autumn. It's quite obviously in the winter months, but it's used all year round. And especially as we're close to the circuit, we're actually quite busy.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you very much, Ms Wilson.
Thank you.
And now the local ward member, Dermot Banbridge, please.
He's been.
Thank you, Chair. I'm the ward councillor for Silverstone Ward, which covers Sirisham. And I'd like to focus on three main areas of concern regarding this application, which I believe warrant its refusal. First being road safety. And I should say that I'm a member of the Institute of Road Transport Engineers. The maximum permitted length of a truck in the UK is 18.75 metres. The distance from the entry of the proposed truck stop to the exit from the roundabout at the top of the slip road off the northbound A43 is approximately 64 metres. I don't know where the 55 came from, but my calculations and experimentation show the rear of such a vehicle coming from the A43 about to turn into the proposed truck stop would be 45 metres from the exit of the roundabout. That's the back of the truck. And that is where the driver of, at that point, is where the driver of a vehicle approaching from behind could possibly see it first. According to the AA, 23 metres is the stopping distance of a car driving at 30 miles an hour. But in the wet, the highway code advises its stopping distance at least doubles. In other words, 46 metres, but the back of the trailer would be 45 metres away, so an accident is possibly inevitable. However, at 40 miles an hour, the distance increases by 26 metres. Which means 26 less metres to stop. There would be further traffic hazards as well due to the long vehicles turning in and out of the entrance. You've seen the picture up there. The second point is noise and smell. The effects of the smell of diesel exhaust and noise from the trucks on the occupants of the nearest house to the proposed truck stop would be intolerable, particularly in the warm weather when windows are open. That house is only about 40 metres from the nearest proposed parking place. That distance is the same as from where I'm sitting to halfway up the mound just outside there. In particular, refrigerated vehicles, which must keep diesel fridge motors running at all times, will be noisy and smelly, not only during the day, but at night, all night. Environmental Health have accepted the mitigation proposition proposed to reduce this, but the noise and smell, particularly in warm weather, will be unacceptable. This will also affect those camping on the land adjacent to that house, and the fumes, being heavier than air, will probably hang over the tents. This could impact on the business of the campsite, of course. And finally, the fuel storage issue. The fuel for the truck stop is proposed to be stored in a tank above ground on a site adjacent to the road on the northern side of the plot, just behind the hedge. Not only is this a potential hazard, should there be a fire or a vehicle should collide with it.
Thank you, Councillor Banbridge. I must stop you there.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll see what develops in the questions. Are there any questions for Councillor Banbridge? No, thank you very much. Now we have the agent to speak to us, Alistair Thorne, the agent for the applicant.
Good evening, members. My name is Alistair Thorne, and I'm an Associate Director at Marins, and I'm pleased to speak in support of the proposed development for the truck stop facility and associated buildings with works and all matters reserved except for access on behalf of the applicant Greystoke Land. There is a clear and defined need for additional truck stop facilities on the A43 in this location. The distance and time spans identified in paragraph 7.221 to 223 of the officer's report relate to requirements for general purpose facilities rather than spacing for freight facilities within the Department for Transport Circular. The freight facility requirements, as set out in the planning statement submitted, refers to a 20-minute drive time and distance of no more than 14 miles. That's at paragraph 81 of the circular. The council's own conclusions at 7.223 detail an existing 24-mile and 30-minute journey time for truck stop facilities. This is clearly below the required standards and is a clear demonstration of need in this location. The view of officers that the recognised need for additional lorry parking facilities on the A43 can be met at identified allocations is not supported by their location, which are focused at or around Towcester. This falls outside of the 20-minute drive time requirement to the nearest existing facilities I mentioned. A number of studies, including the Northamptonshire HGV Parking Study 2009, the Road Freight Strategy in 2013, and the National Survey of Lorry Parking in 2017, all indicate an increasing shortage of HGV parking against an increasing number of HGV movements within the local area. The National Survey of Lorry Parking identified in excess of 865 parked vehicles when compared to lorry parking capacity within the East Midlands region. It is clear that significant weight should be afforded to this type of development based upon the recognised need rather than the limited weight identified by officers. The emerging local plan, as drafted, supports the provision of lorry parks within policy TR6. This policy specifically references the A43 as a location where lorry parks are likely to be required. This is therefore clearly a matter the council is looking to resolve, but it is existing need now that can be met within this location as part of the application. I recognise there are objections from the Local Highways Authority and a holding directive from National Highways, but significant work has been done by the applicant, including a number of further submissions in respect of highways and access, which we consider does demonstrate there are no unacceptable impacts of the proposal. The objections raised in respect of flooding and ecology concerns could be suitably overcome through the use of conditions or resolved through a subsequent reserve matters application. Additionally, it is widely recognised that truck stops provide a much safer environment than the use of HGV parking and lay-bys, and this is a particular benefit of the proposal. I therefore respectfully request members debate the matter and consider the benefits of the proposal alongside its recognised need in this location. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you remain there in case of questions from the members? Are there any questions for Mr. Thorne? No? Thank you very much. Are there any questions to officers from what you've heard? Councillor Pritchard.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to national highways, could you please outline what their observations are with regards to the entrance to this? And also, will there be actually a slip road that goes into the site itself?
Thank you, Chair. So there's no slip road into the site itself. The access would be just very straightforward sort of T-junction arrangement with junction radii into it. So there wouldn't be any slip lane, there wouldn't be any right-hand turn lane for vehicles approaching the site from the north. In terms of National Highways position, I mean, that is, I'll just find the paragraph numbers, but it's set out in detail in the report.
Do you have the page number?
So I think it starts at paragraph 7.58 and continues down to 7.69, but there's a number of points in there where they consider that additional clarification is required before they're able to offer a view as to whether the site is, the access is acceptable, or the development would have an acceptable or unacceptable impact on highway safety.
Also, will lorries coming out of that particular site be able to turn right?
A right turn would be permitted, yes.
So therefore, I think as it was outlined by the ward councillor, is when you look at the length of these lorries, when you think you can imagine turning right with such a short perimeter with regards to the actual highways or the roundabout itself, that could possibly cause a problem.
I think that's reflected in the comments from both highway authorities, in particular the local highway authority, because the B4525 is actually part of the local highway network. And I believe that, I can't remember the paragraph number, but it does set out a number of concerns with proposed access.
Thank you, officer. I just wanted to emphasise that particular point. Thank you.
Councillor Bagot-Webb.
Thank you, Chair. To pick up on 2 points. First of all, there are 2 large truck stops, one at the M40, one at the M1, A43 between the 2. Appreciate there might be a slight discrepancy on the distance between the 2, but it would seem to be a very simple, relatively short distance journey from one point to the next. I don't see the need for a further truck stop in between those 2 points. What is the real justification? Because I didn't quite understand. We're talking just a few minutes difference. Is that really a big issue?
Thank you, Chair. So yes, the distance or the time between the 2 is, again, sorry to bear with me, is approximately half an hour as a drive time. 24 miles, 30 minutes between, yes, the service stations at the M40 and at the M1. The requirements set out as I've set out in the DFT document, which is the Strategic Road Network and Delivery of Sustainable Development. It does. So I was trying to find the relevant comment, but I think essentially what that's doing is setting out guidance as to what the recommended distance would be. Whether it's half an hour or 20 minutes, I think that it's not as though this is a section of road that's significantly in breach of that distance between fueling stations and rest stations.
I mean, I'll just rest on the point of the word guidance. It is guidance. So I think there is a question mark whether there is a need legally. Leave that point, but I'll leave that one there open. Second point comes to the fuelage tanks, which I think Councillor Banbridge was starting to talk about. We understand those tanks will be above ground. We understand that they will be close to the B4525. We also know there's a lot of trucks tipped over and crashed on that particular road. Can we really protect those tanks safely so there is no chance of an incident with those tanks?
Okay, so the reason that the fuel tanks are required to be above ground is that the stipulation of the Environment Agency, who have said that they would actually object if fuel tanks were installed below ground. I think it's due to the the water table and the geology of the site. The layout is indicative, so the tank wouldn't necessarily be exactly where it's indicated on the plan, but when it's installed, it would need to be installed in accordance with health and safety executive requirements that would provide buffering and bunding and protection around it in order to address any identified concern. So for that reason, it's not deemed to be a significant risk that would warrant the refusal of planning permission. As I said, it could be put elsewhere. There could be measures put in place to mitigate it.
May I do question a lot of that? Those very large truck refueling areas, they all seem to be underground. So again, rest my voice on that one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions for the officers? Councillor Sharps.
Just a couple. The site doesn't apparently, according to 7.118, site does not fall into any special landscape design. Obviously noted before by several comments made by residents speaking about the need to protect this area, but it appears not to be a site of specific need to be particularly looked after in that matter. So I love the countryside, I live in the countryside, but that seems contrary to the build here. And the only other thing I wanted to mention was in terms of the noise and environmental impact. And the transient terms of the campers. It is mentioned in here that the campers are considered transient and not considered highly sensitive to the noise. I have concerns when it comes to the movements of the particular lorries inside and outside of that site, but I cannot sit here and say that this might not be the right site without taking into consideration those 2 points. So can you help me out, please, officers?
Okay, thank you, Chair. So just on the point of the countryside designation, I would say that, you know, the majority of the countryside isn't designated, certainly in this area. So just because it's not got a specific designation doesn't mean it's not of value or to be protected. Generally speaking, open countryside is to be protected for its own intrinsic value. So yeah, that doesn't, just because there isn't a designation doesn't mean that it doesn't carry a significant amount of weight in terms of its value. As I said, though, there is the special landscape area to the southern side of the A43. In terms of the environmental protection or environmental health aspects, the points that have been raised by the neighbours and the objectors have been put to, as part of the application process, they were put back to the environmental protection officers, and they reviewed those and came back and sort of reasserted their position that although, you know, I think they would accept that there would be change, I don't think they feel that the extent of impact would be sufficient to sustain that as a reason for refusal. And it could be mitigated, you know, to an acceptable level through noise management strategies and, you know, best practice in terms of operating the site to keep that to a minimum. So that's the reason why it's not saying that there wouldn't be any change, but I think it's just the level of change isn't deemed to be so high as to sustain a reason for refusal.
Thank you. There was one other thing that was brought up, was the footpath, and then we failed to move on with that. We saw, was told that the footpath goes across via the I'm going to say horse footpath then, but I didn't mean that.
Right away.
Right away. Having a senior moment, I do apologise. But I take it goes nowhere, and it is really important if we put something of this size in an area like this, that we do have some structure in place, and this doesn't meet any of our other structures. So yes, it may go, it may win in some areas, but it subsequently fails in so many others. So there's no other area by which it is able to connect with any other areas.
In terms of footways and cycleways, is that, yes. So so there's no existing footway or cycleway along the B4525. Essentially, I'd probably have to go to the north to the point where it would meet the roads to Cyrisham and Pimlico, and it could connect with the existing footway network there.
Would that not be considered dangerous because of the amount of traffic?
Not necessarily. I mean, I think the provision of a footway cycleway, as long as, you know, having one that is segregated from the carriageway is better than people otherwise on country roads walking in the carriageway. So there would be some betterment in that, and depending on the design and the ability, the width within the highway verge, there's the opportunity to have sometimes a grass verge buffer separating. It depends on highways. It would be constructed to whatever the highway authority required and deemed appropriate. But if there were to be a connection, it would need to be in that direction for a distance of about 200 metres to the north.
Okay, I'll try and remember Bridleway in future. Thank you.
Yes, please do. Are there any further questions for officers? No? All right, let's move to the debate. Who'd like to kick off? Councillor Clubley.
Thank you. I'd just like to really state where I am at the moment, because quite honestly, I find this application astonishing. to think about building something like this in open countryside outside of the settlement confines, I think is ridiculous. It would be a huge detrimental effect on the local villages and their enjoyment of their life. We've got highways who are not satisfied. We've heard from various people that this would be a very dangerous location. And to be honest, I agree with all of the reasons set out so well by the planning officer. So I'm not in support of this application.
Thank you.
whatsoever.
Thank you very much. Any other views? Councillor Eastwood?
First, I'd like to thank Daniel Callis for a very good showing yesterday, or day before yesterday, in the pouring rain. Not happy. However, as per previous councillor, I utterly agree. The access and egress from this particular site, and I believe this is really the reason we're here today, is outline access and egress in question. The answer is, I think that Councillor Dermot Banbridge has actually very well articulated the length in which it requires a truck coming off the 43 to turn in. And if there was one slip, there were several trucks trying to have access or leave the site, there immediately would be a backup. So like Councillor Chubley, I think this is, the application is staggering. And I think we're flogging a dead horse. I should not be voting for it.
Thank you. Who's next? Councillor Pritchard?
Yes, could I propose that we accept the officer's recommendations on the basis that it's contravenes to a certain extent the local plan, it's on a greenfield site, and also the lack of observations by the national highways.
Thank you very much. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Clubley. Before I put it to the vote, does anyone wish to speak? Would you like to summarise the recommendation in the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So it's proposed by Councillor Pritchard and seconded by Councillor Clubley that you are refusing planning permission for the reasons set out on page 15 and 16 of the report, and that's reasons 1 to 6. Thank you, Chair.
All those in favour of the recommendation, please show. Thank you. Those against? None. We are unanimous. Thank you very much. I'll call a short break now so that we can change the room for all the new audience that we're expecting for the next application.
We did. Absolutely fine.
Did you think it was going to take 15 minutes?
No.
I'll go around to the minute.
Hello, they're on the way down, so send the moment. Yep. No problem. Cheers.
Saw him go out, I haven't seen him come back in.
This will be quite long. I presume after we having a natural break after this one on College Street.
We could be doing it for each one.
There's
Yeah,
20
because-
there's
well-
only 25 more.
Oh, right, you were talking about.
we lost some? Mr. Burton.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is outline residential development for 110 units, including retirement living complex with all matters reserved except for access. The application site is located on the southeastern edge of Towcester to the north of the A5 London Road. The northwestern area of the site is occupied with an area of unmanaged grassland, whilst the southeastern and eastern parts of the site are occupied by a poplar plantation. The northern boundary follows a sinuous route bound by a tributary stream, which flows eastward to join the River Tove, together with a number of mature trees. Beyond the stream is the eastern park and garden with eastern house further to the north. The site is bounded to the southeast by a poplar plantation, beyond which is the Towcester racecourse. The southwestern boundary is formed by a red brick wall, which is attached to the Grade 1 listed chain lodge. Chain, gate and lodges are attached walls, piers, standards and chains, and is therefore a curtilage listed structure. Beyond the brick wall is the A5, London Road, and the urban area of Towcester. Northwestern boundary of the site is also formed by tree line and small seasonally dry watercourse. Beyond which is Reffield Close, a cul-de-sac that serves a small modern residential development of townhouses. Towcester town centre lies further to the northwest. So here we have the aerial view. You can see the poplar plantation. So the site follows along the river boundary, and then to the north here you can see the permissive path within the water meadows. As part of this application, we have to consider that the site sits within the settlement boundary of Towcester. Therefore, policy LH1 provides that the principle is acceptable following that A, B, C, and D are met. So this is the policy that we need to bear in mind when we're discussing the application and making our assessment upon it. So here we have the indicative layout. Word indicative is important. It's not the final layout. Officers have looked at these plans. They've not been fully assessed, but they demonstrate that the quantum of development can be achieved. We would expect changes to this when a full reserve matters application were put before the committee. One of the important features to note is the footpath. And this is providing a footbridge access into the water meadows. I had 2 queries from councillors, and apologies for not responding this morning, but if you note in the late update, we have included a condition which is to secure the footbridge as a Grampian condition. So this is a footbridge that members of the public can use, whether or not they're resident on the site, and then providing access to the water meadows. Here we have the indicative landscape strategy. You'll note, obviously, the large amount of poplar trees that have been removed. Again, it's important to remember that's a commercial plantation. The applicant or the landowner could remove those trees as a commercial venture as and when required. Because of the removal of the trees, there is replanting, and as part of the report, you'll have noticed the B&G net gain. Now, this application was submitted before B&G was compulsory, but they do achieve a 4.7% increase in habitat units and a 2,869% increase in hedgerow units. The strategy looks to shield the development from the water meadows. There is already a relatively strong tree line there, which I'll show in my photos. But part of the landscape strategy is to shield the development away from views in from the water meadows. I think it will still be perceivable, but I will show some site photos for members to view. And then further planting down to the southeast with a bit of landscaping. Excuse me, members. And then further planting along the listed red brick wall. This is the site entrance onto Reffield Close. So the applicant will make use of Reffield Close. Your Highways Authority have assessed the application and provide no objection. This is the listed road along the A5. That's the listed road, the listed wall along the A5. So the development sits behind this in the tree line. And this is the view in from the water meadows. So you can see the development further behind. So it's the field behind the trees here. To help with the comparison, I took a photo of the neighbouring site. So as you can see, there is a perception of the development behind it, but you can also see the screening offered by the currently mature tree line. You may note that there is a bridge there, but that is a private bridge, and there is a sign up advising members of the public that's a private access and there is no entry that way, so that your officers of the view there is currently no access to the water meadows from that direction in Towcester. So as I discussed at the beginning, LH1 sets out A, B, C, and D. If all four of those criteria are met, then the policy provides that the principle of the development is acceptable. As this is an outline application, we are concerned with the principle of the development here, bearing in mind reserved matters for detailed design will follow. The first part requires that appropriate mix of dwellings are provided. The housing team have been consulted and have set out that a wide range of houses are required in Towcester and across the district. They also point out that 40% affordable housing is required, and that is a 70 to 30% split between social and affordable rented provision, and the 30% of other affordable routes to home ownership. The applicant has set out that they will meet the policy requirements for affordable housing, including the requested 10-year split on the affordable housing. As such, your officers of the view that policy 1A is met. In terms of B, would not result in harm to the character of the area or the loss of public or private open spaces that contribute positively to the local character of the area, including residential gardens. There's two arms to this in this location. It's landscape and heritage. In terms of landscape, it's clearly currently an open space, but one that is inside the settlement boundary. It doesn't have any public access at the moment, but does set a backdrop to the water meadows, and obviously it appears as an open space as you enter into Towcester. The applicants provided a substantial LVIA, which goes through the landscaping proposed and also the mitigatory measures that they would introduce. Having viewed the LVIA and then viewed the site from a number of directions, the officer view is that the landscaping impact does not harm the character of the area, nor is there a loss of public or private open spaces as the site's currently inaccessible. Excuse me. In terms of heritage, the site does lay within the Grade 2 registered park and garden, which is associated with Easton House. As part of the application, the Gardens Trust, Historic England, and the WNC Historic and Conservation Officers have been consulted. All have returned a less than substantial harm caused by the application. This is each consultees come back with a slightly different arm of this harm. The Gardens Trust feel that this, even though it might appear segregated from the rest of the historic park and garden, it should be restored into the park and garden to continue contributing to it. Whereas Historic England and the WNC Heritage Officer feel that it could be considered a separate part of the historic park and garden, in part because of the poplar plantation and how it now appears as a sort of a separate area. As less than substantial harm has been found to heritage asset, the planning balance has to be considered in terms of the public benefit versus the heritage harm. In this instance, officers feel that the provision of the market and affordable housing inside the settlement boundary does outweigh the less than substantial harm found. In terms of 1D, does not need substantial new infrastructure or other facilities to support it. The application site is considered sustainable. It's inside the settlement boundary. There's a number of facilities within walking or public transport distance of the application site, and the applicant has agreed to a raft of Section 106 contributions, including requirements for education, open space, and healthcare. And Lim D of the policy, that it would not displace an existing viable use such as employment, leisure, or a community facility. Well, it's currently inaccessible land. So members are of the view that it would not displace such a use. So in considering the planning balance, your officers have considered the heritage harm, landscape harm, and weighed that against the policy sitting within the settlement boundary and the fact that the application site is considered sustainable And in this instance, your officers recommend that subject to the relevant section 106 and conditions, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we have Mr. Martin Johns on behalf of Towcester Town Council to speak to us. I think you know the form.
Sorry?
I think you know the form.
I do. Thank you for the opportunity to
Chairman, your report summarises objections, but it's only by reading in full the submissions and unambiguous objections from both your own heritage team and the Gardens Trust that I contend there are very strong grounds for refusing this application. This site is within, not adjacent to the Grade 2 star registered park, meaning it is at a higher end of significance of being of exceptional value. Your own heritage team says the NPPF requires authorities to take account of the desirability of sustaining and enhancing the significance of heritage assets and putting them to viable uses consistent with their conservation. The construction of 110 residential units within a Grade 2 star registered park cannot be judged as fulfilling this requirement. Indeed, it will cause permanent harm. The Gardens Trust says the application is the first major step in the lost modern development of the Georgian parkland extension to Eastern Neston. They say that although the harm may be considered less than significant, they find it to be at the upper end of this harm. They say the area would be better regarded as highly desirable to reinstate it as parkland pasture, which would provide greater community value than the loss to urban development. Your own heritage team is concerned that the Towcester Landscape Sensitivity Study and Green Infrastructure Study identify this site as one of the most sensitive areas around Towcester at risk of change. Alternative sites, they say, should be identified that would be less harmful to the landscape and historic environment. Councillors, the Towcester Sioux is such a site. Some 3,000 new houses, 1,800 yet to be built. Since it received planning consent, some 600 additional homes have been built in Towcester on exception sites. There are concerns regarding the ecology, flood management and other matters. Part of the site is in flood zone 2. Officers advise a condition regarding approval of the location and design of any proposed rear garden fencing for apartment blocks to be able to enable the free flow of water. Not a great endorsement, I would say, of the site's resilience to potential flooding. Your report says there should be a 30-year habitat, landscape and ecology plan. Frankly, not realistic, but it does demonstrate the sensitivity of the site in terms of ecology. Chairman, councillors, the Town Council respectfully asks that you take full account of the objections set out in the submissions by your heritage team and the Gardens Trust, and not as summarised in the officer's report, and in line with policies within the NPPF, refuse this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. If you'd remain there in case of questions. Are there any questions for Mr. Johns? No? Thank you very much. You've got a question. Can you put your light on, please?
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sharps.
Are there any other areas of significance like this in Towcester?
Well, according to your own heritage team, there aren't. And as I say, their advice to council, if you will have read the papers submitted in totality with this report rather than simply the summarised report, they come out, as I say, very much against developing this site. And they say that alternatives should be looked at. And as I've said, Towcester hasn't been backward in accepting developments over recent years. 3,000 houses plus exception sites. An additional, I think, 200, 250 were approved last year on the Towcester Sioux, above and beyond what was originally agreed, as the developer claimed that business and commercial units weren't viable. So Towcester has had a lot of development. It doesn't need an additional 110. I am surprised that in the paper on section 106, there's no reference at all to health. Now, health is a big issue in Towcester because we're already under considerable strain in terms of medical facilities. That's before the 1,800 houses with already planning consent are to be built. An application like this, again, with no reference to infrastructure. I thought applications were now supposed to be brought forward in terms of sustainability, yet there's nothing here. As we know, whilst there's plenty of provision currently for primary education, Spon School, the secondary school, is already fully subscribed. So this will only add to that. But I would contest if this were to be developed in part for older residents, I mean, that in itself will put additional strain on medical facilities, which, as you say, already are under tremendous pressure. And yet the report makes no reference to that whatsoever.
The question I asked was of a heritage site of this site. Is there any other heritage type sites of this type?
The biggest heritage site by far in Towcester is our Grade 2 star registered park, of which this application site forms a part. Again,
thank you.
If members have read the report submitted by the Gardens Trust, there are quite a number of pages. It makes the case very strongly that it's part of the park, and it explains how historic gardens have at the edges been used for other purposes, but that doesn't take away their Grade 2 star listing, whereas of course this would. I mean, and they've explained it with historic maps, photographs, and the like. Unfortunately, the officer's report makes no reference to that, and unless members have had the opportunity, where you may or may not have, to dig into all the papers, and there are a considerable number with this application, members may have missed it, which is why I've sort of tried to draw your attention to it tonight.
Thank
But
you.
no, I mean the registered park is the historic asset to Towcester. The fact that at the moment there is no public access. There's no public access to the rest of the park. It's private. You're not allowed to walk through the rest of the racecourse. If they have events there, the public is permitted. But under normal circumstances, no. But in terms of its asset and setting within the landscape, this is a vital part of Towcester's heritage. And I would urge members to using the planning laws that you have within your jurisdiction to refuse.
Mr. Johns, if there are any further questions, could you confine your answers to the actual question that's asked, please? Are there any further questions for Mr. Johns? Councillor Eastwood.
You obviously feel, Mr. Johns, very passionately about this. I happen to agree with you. Do we really need another 110 houses in Towcester?
Well, it's for the planning authority to determine that. But as I say, we've already got, we've had permission for over 3,000 houses. And in addition to that, there's been, I would say, at least 600 additional homes on exception sites on the Burcott Road, for example, the Belborg, a lot of additional housing. And there's another 1,800 houses yet to be built. And I suspect it'll be for you as a planning authority to agree or not. But as the night follows day, almost certainly the developer on the Towcester Sea will claim that many of the areas of commercial and business units that they have designated in those plans, they'll come and say, we can't find any takers. We want another 500, another 1,000 houses. So Towcester is providing its fair share, I would say. It doesn't need an additional 110 in this sensitive location.
Thank you. Any further questions for Mr. Johns? No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Are officers ready to come back on what you've heard so far?
Yes, thank you, Chair. In terms of need, it's well established in planning that a housing target is a minimum, not a maximum. In this case, this site is within the settlement confines. That's important to remember. This isn't an exception site. This is within the settlement confines of Towcester. Therefore, it needs to be assessed as an application that is within the confines. In terms of commercial sites that may or may not come forward for another 500 units, obviously that's not an application in front of us, and not something that I could make a determination on because that those applications aren't with us. Members will be aware that South Northamptonshire does have a robust 5-year land supply. So that's not in question. This isn't an 11D MPPF application, which is where you don't have a 5-year land supply and you have to approve sustainable development. That's not what's in front of you, but it needs to be assessed as LH1 sets out as being inside the settlement boundary. I will, and the gentleman was right to pick up on healthcare. We did receive correspondence, and apologies for not adding this to my sort of beginning gambit. The NHS did respond this morning, setting out that they may request a section 106 for healthcare. And I have confirmed with the applicant that they're happy that that is included in the section 106 as well. So that will be included within the section 106 discussions. My apologies for not bringing that up at the start. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And now we have Mark Lane, the agent for the applicant, to speak to us.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening. My name is Mark Lane and I am the agent for this application and will be speaking today in support of the proposed development. The site lies within the settlement of Towcester, where development is acceptable in principle. Towcester is designated as a rural service centre and falls within the first category of the settlement hierarchy. Towcester has therefore been identified as a suitable location for new development, and by the inclusion of the site in the settlement limits, the same applies to the site. The illustrative layout demonstrates that the site has capacity to accommodate the proposed development, which includes open market housing and affordable housing, and a dedicated unit for retirement living. There is a demonstrable need for market and particularly affordable housing in the district, with 183 new affordable homes required annually. It's well known that there's a housing crisis. And as the planning officer said, these figures are minimum figures, not maximum. In relation to retirement living, West Northamptonshire has an ageing population and has an older age structure than the East Midlands and England. It's forecast that the older person population is projected to rise notably in the future, with a 59% increase in the population aged 65 and over expected between 2020 and 2050. The site represents an ideal opportunity for elderly living as it lies close to local amenities and services, including a supermarket, multiple food and drink facilities on the high street, and Towcester Medical Centre. Public transport is well supported, with bus stops located outside the site. These stops offer regular services to Northampton and Milton Keynes, facilitating sustainable travel options for future residents. The plan incorporates a pedestrian footbridge to the adjacent water meadows and aligns with the water meadows management plan. The footbridge will provide easy access to the water meadows for the residents and for the wider population of Towcester. The proposed development directly responds to the needs identified above, and these are extremely important and significant material considerations. Most of the consultees have raised no objections. Regarding heritage, we have assessed the impact of the development, concluding that given the site was not part of the original park and garden, and that the character of the site is materially different to the rest of the park and garden, and is separated from it visually and physically, that is our view that the harm is at the lower end of less than substantial harm. And we've heard that various bodies attach different weight to that, but it's all in the lower level of less than substantial harm. Archaeological matters can be conditioned, and the transport statement has confirmed that the predicted traffic generation can be satisfactorily and safely accommodated on the local highway network, and the delivery of the scheme is not dependent on the bypass. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. If you can remain there in case of questions. Councillor Barrett.
Yeah, hi. Could you just confirm what the officer said regarding the 106 and the health? Can you confirm that to the committee, please?
Absolutely. The applicant is willing to enter into negotiations to agree contributions towards the health upgrades. And the same applies for any other contribution where facilities need to be upgraded.
Can you give us a little more information about that? What would the nature of the upgrades be?
We don't know yet. So we don't know yet.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Pritchard.
Very quick. With regards to the affordable homes, when I appreciate you've got to finalise your application, but can you actually spread those affordable homes over the whole of the site? Because at the moment, they're just clustered all together in the sense. So, you know, we don't want to commit to the situation with regards to affordable and then non-affordable areas. If we can spread them over. Secondly, also, I did notice there's no attenuation points, and I don't know, perhaps the officer could actually answer that question. And also, you know, we appreciate that National Highways have had no objections, but it'd be rather nice to find out from National Highways, because when it comes out onto the A5, directly opposite the olive tree, you've got another road that comes out that's quite busy. And you can imagine if you had 100 and odd units there, you know, it's going to be, and we appreciate that the link road is going to be open at one stage, but, you know, that's maybe some time yet, but you know, we've got to know exactly how, in fact, the traffic actually is going to cope in that particular. Appreciate also that it's within the village confines and it adheres to our local plan, but you know, with regards to other questions, perhaps you can have those answers.
Do you want me to give those answers now? Well, in terms of the affordable, they of course would be pepper potted throughout the scheme. That's just good planning practice, and I would fully expect that. Clearly, that would be a matter for the reserve matters, but I would fully expect that to occur. As to the attenuation, that would be again subject to conditions and be determined at the reserve matter stage and discharge condition stage. But I do imagine that it would be attenuated. But I can't recall the details of the report, but there was a report confirming how the drainage would be achieved. In terms of National Highways, well, they haven't objected, as you know, Councillor, and we have a thorough transport assessment, which has been assessed by the local authority to agree there's no harm. But it works out that even in peak hours, there's would be 3 movements in that junction in that hour as a result of development. So that's no, three movements a minute. It works out to be. Sorry, Councillor, but that's, in the grand scheme of things, that's not a particular issue. And I was there during rush hour today. No queuing, and I left without delay. So the junction actually does perform satisfactorily. It's good visibility, so I don't actually foresee any problems.
Councillor Randall.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know if you'll be able to answer this, but I was wondering how many of the retirement units would be affordable?
That would be a matter that would be determined at the reserve matters stage.
Any further questions for our speaker? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Officers, would you like to come back on anything you've heard?
So just Councillor Randall's benefit, we would agree the percentages of affordable housing at the outline stage. It wouldn't be a matter of reserve matters, so we'd be looking to secure the policy compliant 40% across the board. So it may be that there's more affordable dwellings and, you know, so over 40% affordable instead of market dwellings and less in the retirement, but it would be agreed as a section 106 now, not at reserve matter stage.
Councillor Barrett, were you coming in? Okay, any further questions? Councillor Bagot-Webb.
Thank you, Chair. I want to come back to use the words the need and in the confinement of the settlement. And then we talk about the grade 2 park. Now, it's almost like a conservation area in my determination of that. How can we include a grade 2 park within the area of the settlement so we can build on it? It just seems to be wrong to me. If you've got a park grade 2, you can then build on it. How can we include that in the settlement build programme?
Mr. Burton?
Councillor, that is the local plan which is adopted, would have gone through all scrutiny and was sat in front of an inspector. So in terms of the local plan having it inside the settlement boundary, it is, and I have no sway on where the line sits. It goes through a Secretary of State examination.
Just because it's in the plan, it doesn't mean to say necessarily it's right, as we found out in other parts of Towcester with other planning applications, things were not defined necessarily correctly. So it still leaves a difficult question in my mind. We'll come on to a second point on the S106 monies for medical as an example. We've seen a lot of this before where money is put aside for medical and somehow it gets, we use the word, squandered somewhere. And we never actually see this big development or big expansion of a facility that is needed as the town expands. How do we actually control that to make sure when we start to get the 106 monies coming in for this development and that development, that it actually does deliver better medical facilities, i.e. bigger facilities? Thank you.
That's, I suppose, a question that sometimes would sit outside of the full discussion I think we'd have at planning committee, but we have a community infrastructure levy where this application would be eligible for, which is £1 per square metre fee, and that goes to some way in terms of funding community infrastructure. All of that monies is determined via policy in terms of infrastructure that is required, including items like healthcare. Then the Section 106 is a separate pot of money. You can't double dip. So if we've set out a community infrastructure levy that has a certain fee in it, we can't then have a Section 106 on top to take that money. So the Section 106 monies is to identify harm that's brought by this development individually. That money goes into the council pot into the identified scheme. So if this application were reckoned for approval and it went through the Section 106 process, I'd write a SIL compliance report in terms of where the money's been requested and what policy we requested it under. And it's then divvied out from those funds. Clearly, a development of this size wouldn't be expected to contribute a new school or a new health centre, but then that pot is built up across the different developments and is then spent by the council. So we get the request in from, as an example, the development management consultee that set out the fees that are required.
Thank you. Any further questions of officers? Councillor Pritchard?
Just one very, very quick, and you obviously referred to it earlier on, but can we have your assurances that there will be a public access onto the water meadows?
So Councillor, in the late update, I included the wording for a Grampian condition, which I discussed with the WNC Estates team, who obviously are in charge of maintaining it. So there will be a Grampian condition, which means that it enshrines public access, not just private access, but public access into the water meadows.
Thank you. Thank you, Roger. Councillor Sharps.
Thank you. I'm afraid I agree with several other councillors here regarding the loss of the grade 2 park. This one particular quote that's in here, 110 dwellings will undoubtedly alter the character and nature of the land in the way that will neither preserve nor enhance its significance. Asset will cause harm, albeit less than substantial, in accordance with paragraph 202. of the MPF that harm needs to be weighed against the public benefit of the proposal. So basically, if we grasp a little bit of 106 and stick it in our pockets, that will outweigh what will happen to the long loss of this piece of land for the rest of basically Towcester and the rest of Northamptonshire. I'm sitting here with the idea that I have to make the decision on historically getting rid of a piece of parkland. And that weighs heavy on me, I'm being honest with you, because as has been said, we have quite a few houses, but we don't have that much parkland, not of this particular quality. If you go through and you read the quality of the animals and basically what we are willing to do to look after them within this document, it's clear that we also regard this area as quite significant for animal inhabitation.
So are you coming to a question?
I am. My question is, although it might be allocated, and it's clear that it is, doesn't make it right, does it? And has there been enough discussion within the planning officers regarding whether or not this should have moved ahead, and what was the pull and thrust about whether or not, just because the allocated land had an application on it, whether or not it should move forward?
Thank you, councillor. For a start, so section 106 money is, I suppose, to wash the development's own face. You don't accept a section 106 as essentially a way of gaining planning, and the developer wouldn't offer a section 106 for something they can't legally offer a section 106 for something that they don't cause harm to. So the section 106 money doesn't focus in the planning balance, and your officers would never consider a contribution to I don't know, the schools to wash the developer's own, development's own face. It's something that's positive in the planning balance. In terms of the planning balance itself, it is, as you say, a registered historic parkland, but it's not accessible. It's the officer's view, having analysed it, it is sort of disaggregated from the rest of the parkland. It's a pocket that's moved away from the rest of the parkland, and I see no reasonable way of the council forcing access into it. You're not going to create a public footpath for this area of Towcester into the rest of the water meadows. You're going to have to continue to go all the way up and go into Tove Park and Drive. So we start building a planning balance in favour then. So as you rightly mention, there is harm. And because of that harm, we have to weigh, as per the NPPF, the planning balance on it. So we start to build that picture of benefit in that we create access to the water meadows for a large number of residents who previously would either have to have driven or had a very long walk up the high street and round. We also, as a matter of course, because it's now where the government inspectorate sit with us, we give significant weight to the provision of market housing and significant weight to the provision of affordable. We do require a large number of affordable houses, and this is policy compliant in the number of affordable houses it's providing. It's also providing a good housing mix in terms of different kinds of sizes. So again, that weighs positively in the planning balance. We then have to weigh, as you say, the harm against it. So we're looking at a scheme which is impacting on a historic parkland. But where do we sort of have to then balance that with, well, what access is there to this parkland? What benefit does this parkland currently provide? It's I don't know if you've been to site. I can sort of show the photos as you look across. It's overgrown. There's a waterway in front of it, so people can't get into it, and it's got a poplar plantation on, which is a commercial woodland. So there's very limited merit there. And it's saying in terms of ecology, obviously the WNC ecologists have gone through this. They found a biodiversity net gain from the development, so there will be an increase in biodiversity from it. It may be that there are certain species that have been found, but the ecologists have felt that the scheme suitably mitigates and enhances the location.
We did hear from the agent that the amount of housing for would be at final stages with you. I think I personally might feel happier if we would know sooner what that mixed housing would be. So if we could definitely say now there would be, I don't know, 5 or 10 houses definitely that would be of social, I would be happier. But at the moment, that's not on the cards.
It's 40% of the development, and they've agreed to the requested tenure mix split as well, which is 70% to social affordable and then 30% to other affordable products. So that's what's been requested from the strategic housing team.
Are we done with questions?
My question is, what happens when they say that the build costs are too high and they reduce those and there's none?
That's not the application we have in front of us. And we couldn't determine applications like that because we enter a hypothetical, and we'd be in a hypothetical continuously then on what if. There will be a section 106, which is legally enforceable. The development cannot proceed unless that section 106 is met. So when the reserve matters comes in, that section 106 sits above it as a legal document. There may be a deed of variation, but that will be for consideration at a different time. But the application in front of us is for 40% affordable. And that is what the applicant has agreed to for the section 106.
Ms. Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add to the officer's comments on that, as he has correctly stated tonight to members, the application currently before members is an outline application. Therefore, further details will follow in due course, generally through reserved matters applications. If there was an issue with viability, for example, that would come forward. It would be independently reviewed, as we tend to do with these matters, and appraised at that point. We can only work on what the information before us this evening from members' point of view. In terms of the 106, if I just explain very quickly how that fits within the planning scheme of matters. So you have your planning policy, national and local. The emphasis from the national planning policy is that there's an emphasis on approval unless there's a reason why we shouldn't be approving a particular development. You then look at those reasons of any identified harm. Then you look at whether or not they can be addressed through conditions and/or a Section 106 agreement. A Section 106 agreement is there to deal with matters that can't be covered through conditions, such as financial contributions for particular identified infrastructure. So there is a process that we are, as a local planning authority, required to follow to get to the point of whether or not a matter can be recommended for grant.
Councillor Pritchard, I think we're ready to start the debate now.
I was actually going to propose that we accept the officer's recommendation, particularly when you think it's in the local plan, it's actually within the village confines. And also you got the situation where, you know, the retirement accommodation is exactly what is required in Towcester.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bagot-Webb and then Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come back on a comment that was made by a legal representative. Surely our job is to make decisions based on policy, but also based on experience. And I won't go into the details, but I've been on planning for a long period, and there have been many plans where we've agreed a certain percentage of a type of property, and it's been approved, only to find 6 months, 12 months, 18 months later, due to the value of the land, it's not been sustainable. So yes, we follow policy, but councillors, in my view, also have to go by experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett.
My concern, as earlier stated, was within the 106 when I saw it, didn't include health. That was my main preamble here, and I think a lot of people shared that. So I'm pleased to see that the agent agreed with that. It's within the confines, and for me, there's no reasonable reason why we would refuse this. So I would second Councillor Pritchard there and move that to the vote.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Does anyone wish to speak on that? Would you summarise what's before us, please, for the recommendation?
Thank you, Chair. It's been proposed by Councillor Pritchard and seconded by Councillor Barrett that the case officer's recommendation be accepted. Obviously, the point has been made by the case officer. You have the list of obligations to secure via the section 106, but in addition to that, you can add to that list the contributions for healthcare upgrades in the local area. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Can I just clarify, in respect to the healthcare, it's subject to confirmation from NHS that they do require them, they're assessing it, and we'll come back to us on that point.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All those in favour of the proposal, please show.
5.
Thank you. Those against?
3.
Thank you. The proposal's carried. Thank you very much. We'll have a short break while those who came for this application will leave and any others outside can come in.
Until what time? It's 1:45. Should we say, oh, it's 22, so should we say 10:02?
Yes, please come back at 10:02.
That's the wrong keyboard.
Nikki Scaife, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the application relates to the erection of purpose-built student accommodation with landscaping and associated works at College Street in Northampton. This is the red outline showing the application site. The application site is located here. You've got the College Street running to the east of the site. You've got the Boston Clipper nightclub situated to the north of the site, New Testament Church of God to the south of the site there, and St. Catherine's Gardens to the west. I'll just go through some more aerial views. This shot here shows the residential accommodation above the Boston Clipper and the windows. There's a distance of approximately 16 metres from those windows there to the boundary of the site where the proposed development would be. This is just a view facing towards the Grade 2 listed church. And then just another view showing the overall context of the site within the wider area. And you can see the Mercure Hotel situated opposite there, and then you've got the Northampton bus interchange situated to the north there. This is a view along College Street. You've got the Grade 2 listed church to the left-hand side, and the development site is just beyond that. You can see this is actually slightly changed now, but that's the former Debenham site that's been converted to student accommodation. That's now been completed and occupied. And then this is a view with the Boston Clipper in the foreground there, Debenhams to the left-hand side, and the Grade 2 church and the application site in between. And then just another shot there down College Street and from Catherine's Gardens looking towards the rear of the site. You can see Debenham's site again in the distance. Just about make out the listed church to the right-hand side behind that tree. So this is the proposed ground floor. It's the development would abut the boundary to the Boston Clipper, which you can see the outline of to the north there. The ground floor would comprise of, it's a secure development, so it'd be secure access to the site. You'd have a communal lounge area, reception area, bin storage located just there, a gym, and then bike storage just behind that. It's just slightly covered there, but secure bike storage within the site. And then there's some student accommodations within the ground floor as well. It's a total of 101 self-contained units with ensuite and cooking facilities within each unit. The unit sizes range from 20 to 23 square metres gross internal floor area, with 5 of the units being 30 square metres floor area accessible units. And that's just a slightly close-up view of the layout of the studio units. That's the first floor arrangement. Effectively, it's a similar arrangement as you go up. This has a terrace area in between the 2 sections of the building there. And second floor, and then the third floor reflects the second floor, but as you go up to the 4th floor, there's it only goes up to three floors on the front part of the building, and then you've got the setback from College Street of this 4th floor. So just some elevations. This is the north elevation, this will be the elevation that faces towards the Boston Clipper, a blank elevation facing towards the pub. You can note the height and that view to the bottom. You can note the height of the church in the background. This is the east elevation, so this is looking from College Street with the listed church to the left-hand side, Boston Clipper to the right-hand side there. Apologies, I'll just go back. The scheme was amended to reduce the height of the building. So the height of the building at the front, the 4-storey element, is approximately 12.8 meters with a 16-meter overall height. So you'd have effectively from College Street, you'd have that slightly lower elevation at the front and then the setback to the higher elevation to the rear of the site. Just an example of some of the materials proposed, but materials are proposed to be agreed in detail by condition. This is the south elevation, so this is looking towards the church. You do have minimal windows on this elevation. They're predominantly secondary windows to studios on the edges here, and then windows to hallways within the middle. And that's just the view from the back. So that's stood in St. Catherine's Gardens, the view that you would get from there. Again, the listed church on the right. And then just a section through here, this gives an indication of the Boston Clipper through the site there. And again, another section through Boston Clipper to the left-hand side, and you can just about make out, it's an indication of the Debenhams site just above there. So the application was considered by committee on the 11th of July. It was deferred from that committee to ensure that the applicant could comply with the requirements of proposed condition 7. That was in relation to the provision of a detailed scheme of noise mitigation to ensure the development could provide an appropriate level of amenity for the occupiers of the student accommodation, and also to ensure that the proposal did not adversely impact on the continued operation of adjacent businesses. It was also to allow environmental health to assess that information and the robustness of the condition, and also to allow further consultation with interested parties. In addition, members requested that officers amend condition 18 relating to the submission of a full site management plan. And that was to ensure that a notice of the hours of use of the Boston Clipper were contained within that management plan. So I'll predominantly focus on noise because that was, as I say, the main reason for deferral. The Boston Clipper, I'll just reiterate kind of the operation of the Boston Clipper and the licensing hours. So that allows for the performance of live music until the early hours of the morning, 7 days a week. So that was considered, and the impact, there's also the impact of the adjacent church, which was taken into account. Since the previous meeting, the applicant's noise consultant has submitted a further noise report, which includes a further detailed analysis of potential sound impacts on the proposed development and details of noise mitigation measures. Those submitted details were posted on the website and also sent directly to the representatives of the Boston Clipper for consideration. The previous noise mitigation measures referred to in the previous committee report, included the use of background noise within the rooms from mechanical ventilation. That was to form part of the noise mitigation measures, in addition to the use of glazing and building fabric. Through this further analysis and the noise assessment submitted, the noise consultants, the applicant's noise consultants, have now advised it's possible to achieve the noise criteria that was set out in condition 7 through the use of specific glazing and the building fabric, and the use of mechanical ventilation as background noise is no longer required. So the proposed glazing in itself would achieve a level of acoustic protection for the rooms within the building, and that in conjunction with the building fabric. would achieve the noise mitigation levels required. Environmental Health have reviewed and discussed the noise mitigation measures with the applicant's noise consultant, and they are confirmed that they're satisfied with the details. Conditions are proposed to ensure that development is carried out in accordance with those mitigation measures. There's also a pre-occupation testing requirement condition to ensure that those mitigation measures, once it's built, meet the required criteria, noise criteria. There's also a further condition that should that not be achieved, then further mitigations are agreed and implemented and further testing done to ensure it meets the required standards. Officers are satisfied that conditions in respect of noise mitigation measures and mechanical ventilation proposed are sufficient to ensure an appropriate level of mitigation is achieved, such that there would not be an adverse impact on the continued operation of existing businesses, and also that an appropriate standard of amenity for proposed student occupiers could be achieved. In addition to the above, as I say, condition 18, which has now become condition 16, that relates to the site management. That's been amended to request that we ensure that we receive a proposed full site management plan that includes procedures for the provision of information for proposed occupiers prior to signing a tenancy agreement in the respect of the opening hours of the Boston Clipper, so that we would expect that to detail the approved licensing hours and any subsequent amendments should there be any in the meantime. Officers acknowledge whilst the above measures can never fully prohibit the potential for noise complaints, officer opinion is that the applicant has done all that can reasonably be expected and requested in accordance with planning policy and guidance to mitigate against adverse noise impacts. As such, officer opinion is the proposal would provide a well-designed development, regenerating a vacant site within Northampton Town Centre, providing much needed purpose-built student accommodation, and subject to the conditions proposed would provide an appropriate level of noise mitigation. So therefore, officer recommendation is for approval subject to the conditions set out in the report and the completion of a Section 106 agreement to secure the construction training provision. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And we have Daniel Edwards, the proprietor of the Boston Clipper, to speak to us as an objector. Would you introduce the person who's accompanying you, please?
Yes, this is Chris Walton from Smith Jenkins, who is representing me in this matter. Do I understand you had registered to speak as well?
Thank you, Chair. Speakers are able to bring consultants or other experts to answer any technical questions from the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, please, when you're ready.
Members of the committee, I am Daniel Edwards, owner of the Boston nightclub.
It is on.
Thank
you.
Sorry?
Yeah, carry on.
When the application was presented in July, members deferred a decision. The minutes from that meeting state this decision was taken to ensure the applicant could comply with requirements of Condition 7 relating to provision of a noise mitigation scheme. The applicant has since submitted information to the council to address Condition 7. Following a review of this information by a noise consultant, we highlighted several issues regarding the mitigation scheme to officers who have subsequently chosen not to articulate these issues in the committee report. Instead, they've summarised the applicant's responses to the issues, robbing the committee of an opportunity to make a decision based on the merits of two conflicting positions. This is both irrational and unreasonable. Turning to the committee report, officers once again dismissed our requests for the applicant to enter into a deed of easement and separately provide contributions towards enhancements to noise mitigation measures at the Boston. The report continues to demonstrate that officers misunderstood the purpose and utility of a deed of easement. The report suggests such an agreement would be difficult to manage and enforce. To be clear, A deed of easement is a one-time contract between the landowner and business. It wouldn't cost the council or the applicant anything to put in place. It would, however, provide the Boston with additional protection when noise complaints are received from occupants of the development, as it would factor whether the complainant was being unreasonably affected. Within this context, it's important to emphasise that the noise mitigation strategy is entirely contingent on windows being closed when the Boston is open. The idea that occupants will not open their windows at night time because they have access to mechanical ventilation is out of touch with reality. Creating a situation which could lead to the closure of a cherished local venue for the LGBTQ+ community, whilst declining multiple opportunities to strengthen its protection from noise complaints in the process, is senseless. The flawed rationale to refuse our requests for additional protective measures is underscored at paragraph 2.4 of the committee report. Officers dismiss the use of contributions towards noise mitigation measures on the basis they would be ineffective if the Boston's external doors were left open. This is ironic, given that the applicant's entire noise mitigation strategy will be bypassed when a student opens their window. Officers, in fact, place more trust in a transient population of students to protect my business than they do in me. This notion is quite frankly insulting. Members, the application before you cannot be approved. To date, the applicant has failed to prove they can comply with the requirements of condition 7. Should the committee reach an alternative conclusion on this matter, any decision in favour of the development must commit the applicant to enter into a deed of easement and provide financial contribution towards noise mitigation measures at the Boston. The future of Northampton's last remaining LGBTQ+ entertainment venue and my livelihood hang in the balance. Thank you.
Thank you. I must stop you there. Are there any questions for Mr. Edwards? Councillor Barrett.
Thank you for that. You will recall from July, I spoke quite passionately around protecting the cultural heritage of your business and protecting the people who use it. So just for clarity, was any deed of easement discussions, have they taken place post that meeting? Because from memory, that was the indication we were given by the representatives who spoke.
No, so there were some discussions prior to the previous meeting between the developers and myself. And at that time, they were prepared to offer a deed of easement. However, that was conditional and it was in exchange for my outright withdrawal of my objections. At the time, in principle, this seemed to be okay. However, when I sought advice on the matter, I discovered that the deed of easement did not provide the level of protection that I had first thought that it would do. Which in layman terms, I basically thought that if that was in place, any noise complaints made from that would be disregarded, and that is not the case at all. So having took advice on it, we were unable to come to that agreement. However, it was something that was offered previously.
Carry on.
Thank you, Stephen. Just for Catherine, I know what a deed of easement is. Could you share the definition for the committee, please, so everyone's on the same page?
Thank you. It is a legally binding agreement between two parties. It isn't a planning agreement. It stands outside the planning process, albeit in this instance, if it was to be agreed, it would be pertaining to a planning application and decision, but it would stand outside the planning process.
Thank you. Any further questions? No, thank you very much. Now we have James Simpson, a local supporter for the scheme.
So ready to go. So I'm James Simpson. I am the general manager at the Mercure Hotel in Northampton, which was located just off St Catherine's Gardens, adjacent to the boundary of the proposed on College Street, the proposed building on College Street. I'm here today to pledge support to the building, to the planning proposal. As the manager of the hotel, we've just gone through a significant investment at the hotel. with 1.4 million to make us a 4-star hotel, the only 4-star hotel in the town centre. And my basis for approval of this planning is based around the regeneration of the area, more so St Catherine's Gardens. St Catherine's Gardens attached to the hotel and attached to the College Street proposal is a big area of antisocial behaviour. There's a lot of antisocial behaviour, drug dealing, drug use in that area. I've invested a lot of time and resource into supporting local schemes to try and enhance that area. I have 73 of the 146 bedrooms overlook that park, and the feedback I get from a hospitality business, which is what I'm judged on from my guests, is that the antisocial behaviour of that park and the unsightliness of that park is very much a deterrent and a factor of not returning back to Northampton as a leisure guest. The proposal I see, as you saw from the pictures, would be a significant number of windows and openings overlooking the park, which in itself has proven historically has helped support the reduction in antisocial behaviour. And as such, I'm supporting the proposal for the planning. Also, along with that, the 100 plus students that would accommodate in the dwelling would support the local economy, which is obviously a key focus of the regeneration of Northampton itself, with the Market Square, the Fish Street, and also the new Stack development, which is proposed and hopefully being started very soon. So it would bring economy to the area, which would also support Northampton as a town itself. Just to support, literally, I support due to that. With regards to noise, as the manager of the Mercure, I've been there 5 years. I've had very little interaction with noise complaints from the Boston, which I know has been raised recently in a previous committee meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. If you remain there in case of questions from members, do you have any questions for Mr. Simpson? Councillor Clubley.
Yeah, obviously last time we were very concerned about the noise from the Boston Clipper because it is a long established business in Northampton, and we didn't want them to be faced with the prospect of getting summonses or environmental officers around from the students. So can you just go into a little bit more detail, because you're not too far away from the Boston Clipper? I mean, do hotel guests or anything complain about any noise coming from the Boston Clipper? And what in your voice is there a noise, and how high is it?
No, there is a noise, but it's just a normal city centre town noise. We don't have I haven't had a reported complaint about noise specifically from the Boston in the 5 years that I've worked there. So, pardon me, the one complaint that I did have was when it was COVID and it was outside area only. And that's when we had to have an interaction with the Boston to just have a conversation about the noise levels. And that was the only time that I've had to have that conversation. I have spoken to my team and I have daily management reports, and there's nothing reported on there in the last period. There's nothing there to say that there's been any noise complaints from guests. The more complaints I do get are from the guests are about the negativity of the park and the surrounding area. So the regeneration is key for me as a business.
Any further questions for Mr. Simpson? No? Councillor Sharps.
It's a strange question, but I'm going to ask it. Do your windows open?
The windows do open, yes. By about quarter inch.
A quarter inch. I've
Yeah.
stayed in one of not your hotel, but a
Yeah,
Mercure.
they're unrestricted.
There's a restricted window.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions? No? Thank you very much. Now we have Mr. Andrew Wilkes, the agent for the applicant, to speak to us. Would you bring the microphone closer to you, please? Thank you.
When we last met on the 11th of July, the applicants were tasked with discharging two planning conditions that we've heard about already, noise and overheating. We engaged with the Boston nightclub during the preparation of the various reports, and the Boston nightclub believed a deed of easement would not be robust enough and was a position that we accepted. Similarly, any Section 106 agreements for a deed of easement would not be robust enough, a position accepted. Similarly, the only definitive way for occupants of the proposed student accommodation not to be aware of noise is to stop such noise entering the building through the building structure, and that's the approach we've taken. The current position is that the discharge reports were prepared by us and submitted on the 30th of July. Both reports have been properly considered by WNC Planning Service and Environmental Health Department, and the conditions set have been satisfied. However, on the 16th of September, we received Boston Nightclub's Condition 7 review of proposals, and on the 19th of September, we submitted a response to that. The review document requests suitably worded planning conditions should be imposed to ensure that the noise mitigation measures are suitably designed and selected pre-construction, and suitable noise criteria are achieved post-construction. That's exactly what the planning conditions already imposed, and we believe they are now discharged. As you may know, the applicant's drapery building is now occupied by over 200 students. The building has rooms facing College Street, diagonally opposite the Boston nightclub's rear courtyard where sound emanates. After inquiry of 34 of those students and those occupying the rooms since the 14th of September, no occupant is aware of any noise disturbance from the nightclub when it is operating. In summary, our Condition 7 discharge report concludes noise from the nightclub will not penetrate into the proposed student accommodation. The Condition 7 report is not dependent upon masking noise from building services. There is no need. The physical performance of the external envelope of the new student accommodation building has been designed to attenuate that noise emanating from the Boston nightclub or elsewhere. A considerable amount of design and modeling has been undertaken to technically prove this beyond doubt. However, the proof of the pudding, etc. Condition 7 has a requirement for noise testing in rooms prior to occupation. The applicants.
Please carry on. Oh, you've finished, have you?
Well, I can carry on. Yeah.
Well, let's see what develops from the questions then.
Okay. All right. Fine.
Yeah.
Apologies.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Wilts? No? Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed, Chair.
Any questions for officers? Members, any questions for officers? Councillor Clubley.
Yeah, just if the officer can confirm that in their view, will residents of that building not be able to hear noise from the clipper?
I'm not a noise expert myself, as we've discussed. It's gone through consideration by noise experts in environmental health, who are our noise experts in this instance, have confirmed that they're happy with the mitigation measures achieved. It's not that you won't hear any noise, it has to achieve a certain reasonable level to get a reasonable level of amenity. And there's I think, as the noise consultant was about to say, the proof of the pudding remains, and that's why we've got these further conditions for testing before the building actually gets occupied. And a further condition that in the event that mitigation, which we're assured at the moment will meet the criteria, there's a further condition to ensure that criteria is met. So officers feel we've done as much as we possibly can to ensure that there's a good level of amenity and also that the business is protected. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions to officers? Councillor Bagot-Webb.
Thank you, Chair. We've heard about the McCure and the small opening on the windows. In the building design for this one, what's the maximum the windows will open? Are they restricted? And would we expect more noise because of location to go through those windows compared to Mercure?
We haven't been asked by Environmental Health to set a restrictor on those windows. The Boston, although it's licensed and can operate throughout the day, at the moment it operates late afternoons through to the early morning, Thursday through to Sunday, although it could operate throughout the week on those hours. It was a judgment as to providing an acceptable level of amenity when people could open their windows during those times when the Boston isn't in operation, but they also then have the opportunity to shut those windows and make use of the mechanical ventilation to achieve. So it's getting that balance between what's required for the mitigation and students' personal choice as well.
Thank you.
Any further questions to officers? No? Okay, views from members then. Councillor Barrett.
As I've discussed, the heritage value of the Boston is long-standing and must be here for time to come because of the safety nature of the environment it provides for lots of our residents. So when we met in July, we were all mindful of doing as much as we possibly could to ensure that heritage continues, which is why we came back with the condition 7 amongst other things. My concern after hearing what the Mercure have said in terms of the window, and I share colleagues' view about the opening of the window, and I understand the balance that Nikki's talking about as well, about personal choice. My only concern is that's something that hasn't been addressed. The Mercure have a precedent set that works because, as he said very clearly there is mitigation there, and there isn't one noise complaint in 5 years, I think. So I'm aware of the geography of the Mercure to that place, and then I think as we were suggesting there, would a further condition imposed on that gap of the window finalise our assurance that we've done all we can as a committee and as a council to ensure that the business is protected, the heritage part of the business is protected, and it still remains that safe space for that community. So I share my colleague's view on that. I think that's my only other concern really. Could we add a partial condition to that in terms of the window opening gap?
Officers, would you like to respond to that?
I think we would need to take advice from building control colleagues in respect to kind of the ground floor and the floor above that, and obviously health and safety aspects. Anything above that wouldn't be used as a fire escape. I'm advised by building control. I would need to take advice as to the degree of restriction on windows.
Thank you. Okay, any other views on this? Councillor Randall.
Yeah, thank you. Generally, if you open your window a few inches or wide open, you get exactly the same noise, I would have thought. I think that actually you've taken on board everything that we wanted you to do last time, and you seem to have done everything within your powers that you could have done. And lots of students are used to living near busy main roads that traffic flies past all through the night. I think as officers have done as much as they could have done. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bagot-Webb.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up on this opening gap. I mean, clearly there is a safety issue once you get into the third floor or maybe second floor, and that's usually safety device anyway. But most of those you can override if you want to. So my thought would be, if you had a device on those windows that gave you the Mercure opening, as a default, if you wish to,